Hi, this is Bud Gibson. I'm the director of the Center for Digital Engagement, and we're here with day 3 of our digital marketing workshop series. We still have day 4 tomorrow, and then we have our luncheon on Friday. But here for day 3, we have Jim Fasone presenting a panel on finding your audience, and Jim will be the moderator. And then we have Destiny Frank, who will be our Facebook question wrangler. So you're watching on Facebook Live. Please be sure to post those questions. And so, Jim, who have we got today? Jim, you're muted. You're on mute.
How was that?
Yeah, can hear you now.
There you go. You knew there were going to be technical issues when you have a lawyer at the operating controls. So we have with us today, speaking of law firms, we have Kate Sandretto, who is the marketing director for the Sam Bernstein Law Firm. Hi, Kate. Thanks for joining us. And we have Beth Snider, who is the director of annual giving and marketing for the Holocaust Memorial Center in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Beth, thank you for joining us. We may have another guest join us. She's in between her office and her remote work to try to get on because of some power challenges at the office. So hopefully Denise Fair Razo, who is the Chief Public Health Officer for the City of Detroit, will be joining us as well to give us her thoughts on digital marketing and sort of what has happened over the last year that factors into that. So we're glad to have all of the guests with us this morning. Thanks, Bud. And again, remind folks that Destiny's there to work on questions that you might post in Facebook Live. So feel free to comment on the Facebook Q&A. She'll gather them together, and we've built time into this schedule to make sure that we can answer your specific questions. The kind of the place that we want to start is a little bit of how each of our eclectic group here, which is a nonprofit, a large law firm, and a municipal city department, all with different goals and budgets and staffs, have to approach marketing and digital marketing in particular in finding their audience, and how that has changed over the last year and a half now because of the pandemic. But let's start with a brief background. Tell us a little bit about your background, Kate. Let's start with you on how you find yourself in the role of marketing director for the Sam Bernstein Law Firm.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me, everybody. And yeah, so I'm the marketing director at the Sam Bernstein Law Firm. I started out at Central Michigan, and I majored in marketing. And then from there, once I graduated, I went to a couple different ad agencies where I worked on a variety of accounts and larger accounts specific to Michigan. And then the position at the firm became available, and I ended up there and have been there for just over 5 years now.
Seen a lot of changes. We'll talk about that. I see that Public Health Officer for the site has joined us. Denise, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for okay.
So let me go to Beth. She's actually on the screen. Beth, why don't you take that first question as well? Give us a little background. Tell us you ended up being the Director of Annual Giving and Marketing for the Holocaust Memorial Center in Farmington Hills.
Hi, I'm Beth Snider, and as Jim just said, I'm the Director of Annual Giving and Marketing at the Holocaust Memorial Center. The Holocaust Memorial Center is a museum in Farmington Hills which teaches about how 6 million Jewish civilians were killed by the Nazis during World War II, and why it's critical, therefore, for everyone today to stand up for the rights of other people if we want to prevent future hate crimes and genocides. I have a degree from Wayne State University in journalism. I started out my career in journalism and public relations, and then I segued into grant writing and other fundraising. In my current job at the Holocaust Memorial Center, I was hired as a fundraiser, but then due to my writing abilities, I ended up creating a lot of the HMC's marketing materials. Then the next thing you know, I was placing ads. So now my time is pretty much split between fundraising and marketing.
You see, no good deed goes unpunished. You did really well, so they said, okay, you're going to do this for us. Well, that's great. And as soon as we get Denise into the mix here video wise, we'll ask her the same question to talk about how she got there. But excellent. Denise, welcome. I understand you had a little power challenges this morning. As I've mentioned before, you're the Chief Public Health Officer for the City of Detroit. And the first question we've kind of asked our panelists is to explain a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the role that you're currently in.
Sure. So, Jim, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. One of the things that I have learned throughout the last 20 months is that when you are in the middle of a crisis as a leader, you have to take a deep breath and be able to lead. So this morning, and which is why I'm a little bit late, we had a major power outage at the health department, and there are multiple people that were involved, from locating, moving our vaccine and making sure marketing and communications is informed, making sure our patients are informed. And so it has been a very crazy morning, but we were able to still move forward. So I am really glad to be here. Over the last 20 years in my career as a healthcare professional, I have been in a variety of different administrative roles. In fact, when I was probably about 10 years old, my goal was to be a physician. Didn't quite work out, because when I went to the University of Michigan, go Blue, I found out that I didn't really like science. Science was definitely not my forte. Couldn't really pass any of my classes. I still had the nerve to want to take the MCAT, and so tried and did not do well. But there was still hope for me. So I remember going to my counselor, my academic counselor, and she encouraged me to look into the field of public health. And public health really is taking care of an entire public, and taking care of an entire population and their health. And so I ended up going to UC Berkeley to get my master's in public health. And then I did a fellowship with Trinity Health right after I graduated from Berkeley with my MPH. Again, variety of different administrative roles, from Trinity to Henry Ford Health System, running medical clinics. And then I got a call from the mayor's office in the city of Detroit. And they said, Denise, we think you'd be great. We should, entertain the idea of running the health department. And I said, running the health department? Oh, no, absolutely not. That's a big job, not thanks. Then I remembered why I went into public health for the first place. My and really encourage people to thrive. And so I was appointed by Mayor Mike Duggan in September of 2019. Little did I know that a few months later we would be in a pandemic. And so again, it started from a simple phone call, level of interest, and then here I am today, and my goal is to provide health and wellness for 700,000 Detroiters, and make sure that they have the opportunity to thrive. So that's my story.
Well, as I said at the outset, this is an eclectic bunch. They're not all straight up digital marketing professionals, and I think that's important, because we're going to get a lot of unique insights. And certainly in the last year, we've seen lots of changes in many areas, especially when it comes to trying to connect with your people or your audience, whether you're a law firm or a museum, memorial center, or a health department. So that sort of pandemic shutdown, where you couldn't have gatherings and you couldn't do it the way you've always done it, caused everybody to pivot and rethink their direction. Kate, why don't I start with you? Tell us a little bit about the changes that you've seen in the last year and the pivots that you've had to make because of the situation the country was in.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not already familiar, the personal injury category frequently talks about in-person services, such as visiting clients at their homes or in the hospital. And during the pandemic, we were still offering those services, but we realized the vast majority of people didn't want us coming to their home or the hospital just because of COVID. So what we did is we recognized that and changed a lot of our messaging to focus more on signing up clients electronically and doing virtual services for them. Another strategy we used during COVID was focusing a lot more on our public image and the public service that we do. So personal injury is very much focused on accidents happening. And because of COVID and the shutdowns, a lot of people weren't driving to work and weren't going out to eat, weren't driving really anywhere. So it's a great thing that less accidents were happening for the community, but that also heavily impacted the personal injury category when we focus mainly on helping people after an accident occurs. So we had a bunch of advertising in place that, to be honest, wasn't really relevant to what people were needing. People weren't really needing an attorney at the time just because less accidents were happening. So we used a lot of our advertising weight to focus more on the public service work that we do. And we developed two campaigns out of that. One was a partnership with Bigby, where we offered free coffee for essential workers. And another one was with the American Red Cross, where we highlighted the impact the pandemic had on them and just the need for blood donations, and highlighting the fact that it was still safe to donate blood during the pandemic due to the procedures that they implemented specifically to address that. So that honestly was received really well by the community. We received some great positive feedback from people on just educating the public on what was going on versus, continuing to hammer the message of Call Sam.
Interesting. And I know at the Holocaust Memorial Center, Beth, the shutdown really disrupted the business model, if you will, for the nonprofit. Talk to us about what your concerns were in the beginning and how you reacted to that as this proceeded.
Well, right before the pandemic, we had received some donations that allowed us to hire a social media manager and also to consult with the marketing firm to help us reach young new audiences through social media. So fortunately, we were well positioned to pivot to virtual during COVID. However, we had never held a virtual program before, and we were mostly unfamiliar with live stream platforms such as Zoom, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. In addition, although we posted on social media, we rarely purchase social media ads. Today, we've become very experienced with virtual programs, live stream platforms, and social media marketing. However, I'm sorry to say our social media manager recently left us. So if you know anyone who would like to apply for this position, please send them to our website.
Public service announcement.
That's right.
Denise, I'm going to ask you the same question as this began to roll out and the shutdown orders existed. Talk to us a little bit about what your thinking was at the beginning of the pandemic and those initial, how are we going to change what we're doing?
Yeah, so we had to rely on social media to get the message out, because as you mentioned, Jim, this was an opportunity to take all 500 people or so at a time and put them into an auditorium to tell them about COVID. We couldn't do that. So we relied on daily press conferences with the mayor and myself. And for those who just were not watching press conferences, we tuned into Facebook Live, Instagram Live, again, to get the word out there. And, there's a lot of misinformation on social media, which is why we wanted to get ahead of it. And even now, we have several clinicians, so doctors and nurses who are on social media, who are providing truth rather than false information, to educate all Detroit residents about COVID. And it's been wonderful. Like, again, we've had to use multiple ways to get people to listen. I mean, not only have we used the Facebook and Instagram, but we've even now partnered with TikTok, which I'm still learning how to operate, and also Snapchat. Again, the goal is to meet people right where they are. In the city of Detroit, there are 40% of people do not have access to high-speed internet. So it did make it considerably challenging, but again, we still needed to move forward utilizing the resources that were available to us.
I want to back up, Beth, to a comment you made that prior to the pandemic, the Holocaust Memorial Center had not done online programming, and having participated and watched a lot of your programming over the last year. I find that hard to believe because it's so good. But
Thanks.
talk to us a little bit about, you know, making that big move from having folks come in and listening to a lecture or a talk and switching over. How has that been received by your audience? And have you found an audience for it?
Oh, okay. So prior to the pandemic, this was what our business was. We had live guided tours at our museum, live teacher trainings. We train teachers throughout the state of Michigan in Holocaust and genocide education, and live public programs in our auditorium, such as speakers and concerts on weekends and evenings. So right after the pandemic hit, we had one of our biggest public programs of the year coming up, our Holocaust Remembrance Day Commemoration, which was very popular. So normally that program would consist of speeches, songs, and Holocaust survivors lighting candles on the stage. So we decided to make a video, which we would embed on our homepage for people to watch, which was something we had never done before. And also, since we were all in quarantine, most of it was filmed on cell phones and then edited together by a video production company, if you remember those days, which was just a year ago. But surprisingly, it turned out to be a really beautiful program, maybe even better in some ways than a live program would have been. And most but not all of our regular audiences either understood or were able to be taught how to go to our website and click on the link to watch it. Our next public program was a speaker program featuring an author who wrote a book about Nazi hunters. If you remember, mail service was insane at the beginning of the pandemic, so it didn't make sense for us to mail people a flyer about the program because who knows if they would have gotten it. So then we started using email and social media much more to advertise our programs, which was really a wonderful change for our organization and has brought us many new audience members, donors, and friends. Anyway, I could continue on, but I'm not sure how much more you want me to say.
Thanks. No, I think that gives a flavor of it and how the organization had to change. And Denise, you mentioned that such a high percentage of Detroit residents don't have high-speed internet, but at the same time, you took an approach of using social media and, in fact, videotaping a how to wear a mask video early on. Tell us a little bit about that and how it took off.
Sure. So we needed to figure out a way to communicate to a broad audience about how to wear a mask because the information was changing. So we were hearing from the CDC, you don't have to wear a mask unless you're working with sick people or you yourself are sick. But then just within probably, a couple of days later, the recommendation was for everyone to wear a mask. And so because there wasn't a lot of masks that were readily available, you couldn't just go to the store to purchase one. There was an easy way to just make a mask out of just cloth, like an old t-shirt or a bandana. So my team and I literally set up my iPhone in my office, and we just recorded a video and uploaded it to YouTube. And within a matter of a few days, we had over 600,000 views. And that video was shared across the country. And that was really powerful. Again, it was just created with an iPhone in my office. And, it's not like we didn't use a lot of amazing technology. But again, in crisis mode, you just have to lead. And we had to use the technology that was available to us.
Well, I think that's a lesson to be learned both from Beth's discussion and yours, is that you don't have to have this massive budget. You don't have to be an expert in the field. You have to just try something and do the best you can with it, even if it's an old T-shirt, turning it into a mask. But let me turn a bit to Kate. You do have a big budget.
Mm-hmm.
You did talk earlier about how you changed the direction to more public image and public service marketing to get to help the brand. Talk to us a little bit about that shift, maybe from TV or radio to more social and digital. Did that occur during the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. We were still on TV. Our brand was built on TV, so we'll always be there. It's evolving though. So yeah, times have definitely changed just in general, and especially during the pandemic. So we consider ourselves to be somewhat of a legacy brand with the Call Sam name, which has been great since people basically know who we are from the get-go. But times have changed. I mean, younger generations now don't watch TV like they did in the past. So we've had to evolve pretty significantly to kind of reach different generations through different platforms where they are. So yes, we still use a variety of platforms, but we have definitely evolved more towards digital, especially with the pandemic, with more people using streaming and just viewing content in different ways.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, the audience has shifted away from TV. Therefore, all those ads on TV may not be getting the attention you were expecting. And I can't wait to see the TikTok videos coming out of the health officers next. So that's another area we should probably delve back to. But we've hit a point where we said we would take some audience questions. And let me ask my co-host here, Destiny Frank. Destiny, do we have any questions you want to intersperse here?
Yes, we do. First, to start off, we have a question for Denise from Susan. It says, a question for Denise. Since 40% of Detroiters don't have access to high-speed internet, how do you reach those folks?
That's a really great question, and thank you so much for asking it. So we are going old school, door to door. So right now with our vaccination campaign, we have knocked on over 320,000 doors, and we are encouraging Detroiters to get their vaccine. So that has been kind of the old public health approach when you go door to door. Not only have we gone door to door, but we are relying on trusted leaders in our community to share the message forward. So at the height of the pandemic, we partnered with pastors. And we encourage them to come and get their vaccine at the TCF Center. And then we encourage them to go back to their churches to say, I got the vaccine. Because I got the vaccine, then you should get the vaccine. Again, trusted leaders in our community. We also relied on our salon owners and also barbershop owners, because we know a lot of Detroiters, they get their nails done just like me. Of course, don't look today because they're not done. And also a lot of our Detroiters go to the barbershop, right? And so when there's an opportunity for a resident to sit in the chair of a barbershop owner, they have all types of conversation. So we've trained several leaders in the area to share that message forward, to educate them on the efficacy of the COVID vaccine. So that has worked really well. So even though 40% of Detroiters don't have access to high-speed internet, we still had an opportunity to communicate with them.
That's great. We also have another question for Kate. It says, now that life, from Nautica, it says, now that life is semi-normal, has the law office seen consistency or an uptake in CRM?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I'd say things have definitely leveled out since the beginning of COVID, but it's different because there's so many people who are just living their lives differently than they did before. There's so many people like myself who are still working from home for the majority of the time. So it's definitely changed the way leads come through to us and definitely changed the volume. Previously, we had much more consistent numbers because people were driving Monday through Friday. Now we tend to see a little bit more of a swing one way or another because there's some days where a lot of people go to the office and other days where less people are out and about driving. So that tends to swing the way accidents happen as well, and tends to swing the leads that we get through our CRM.
Could you explain maybe for those who don't know what CRM means?
Sure. It's like, it's basically customer relationship management. So it's the system we use to manage all of our leads that we get in-house.
Okay, great. Beth, why don't I give this question to you? It says, from Olivia, it says, what social platforms have been most effective for your organization to reach audiences?
So in June 2020, we began using online Zoom webinars for our public programs. You would have thought that everyone in the country by June of last year would have known by then how to use Zoom, but we have a lot of senior citizens who watch our programs. So we had to actually train a lot of our audience members when they would sign up for programs. We would have to teach them how to use Zoom. And also our staff had to learn because there was, being in a Zoom meeting is not nearly as complex as hosting a Zoom webinar. But we learned and it went well. And today we host all of our also streamed on embedded in our website. Attendees who would never come to a live program because of reasons such as distance or they're homebound. But it's really been great for us because we often attract 500 people to our virtual program, but if we were having a live program, we could only fit 300 people into our auditorium. So going forward, we don't think we're ever going to go back to 100% live programs. We're going to have a mix of virtual programs, and then when we do have live programs, then we're going to live stream them so that people can still watch them remotely.
Great. This is kind of a question for everybody. From again, Olivia. It says, how do you think your marketing responses to the pandemic will impact future marketing strategies for your organization? Beth, you kind of talked about it a little bit. Maybe start off with Denise, and then maybe Kate, you can also comment as well.
That's an interesting question. I would say that we can't just rely on Facebook at all. We have to be open to utilizing additional platforms that are relevant across the city. So for me, I wasn't and still not really a TikTok user or a social media user or what do you call it? A Snapchat user. However, when we look at our data in the city of Detroit, about 50% or so are vaccinated. Of the 50% that are not vaccinated, about 40% of those are under the age of 40 years old. That's a huge demographic. And so if we're trying to reach that demographic, my goal is to figure out how can I best communicate with them. So I think to your question, marketing communications will need to adjust, again, to be able to be nimble and in order to connect with the community.
Yeah, so I'd add to that and say, for the firm, I think the biggest learning experience we had from the pandemic was how quickly we can actually adapt our messaging. The pandemic came on so quickly and things shut down within a matter of like a week. We were able to evolve our marketing messaging on a dime through using Zoom and some different techniques that we hadn't used previously, just because we didn't need to be honest. And now we kind of have more resources available to us from that standpoint, which allows us to kind of turn things around in a much faster way.
Great answers. Why don't I pass it over to you, Jim, and then we'll have more time for more audience questions later. So make sure you continue to write into the chat. But for now, I'll pass it back over to you, Jim. Okay. All right. I think Jim's connection kind of broke a little bit, but we do have another audience question. So from Jamie is, how do you effectively develop strategies to target such a broad and ever-changing audience? Why don't we start off with you, Beth?
So I had talked before about our public programs, but we also have a lot of programs for students and museum visitors that we also had to pivot to virtual. So we looked into offering just like a virtual tour of the museum, but then it seemed like that wasn't what teachers really wanted. So instead we made like a virtual program, which is more like we talk to them about the Holocaust, and we have a Holocaust survivor talk, and we have artifacts that we show them like in an hour program. So we now offer that, and then we don't think that we're planning to go back to 100% live, because even though now we have schools returning to the Holocaust Center for field trips, so we still have schools that can't come, like let's say schools in the UP, because we serve the entire Michigan. So the schools in the UP and up north and out west, so they love our virtual programs. And then also even some of the local schools, like let's say if they come for a field trip and they want a second program. Also our teacher trainings, we had to completely switch those to virtual, and that again allowed us to reach more teachers all over the state. So in the future, again, we plan to offer a mix of both live and virtual programs so that we can reach the maximum amount of students and teachers in the state.
Great. Denise or Kate, do you either of you have any to add to that, or maybe your own experience?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Is how do you effectively develop strategies to target such broad and ever-changing audiences?
Yeah. So I'd say the biggest thing to identify a strategy is to really define the end goal first. I think whether there's so many different goals out there, whether it's increasing like leads or just, making people aware of your message. So I think figuring that out is the biggest piece to the puzzle, to be honest. And then from there, you kind of backtrack in like what the best way to do that is versus whether it's social media or more of a direct targeted campaign where you're specifically identifying people to target to meet the end goal.
I think it's important to realize that not every platform will be, and I mentioned this earlier, not every platform will or even should be catered to the same audience. So again, when the mayor and I were doing press conferences every day for months, my question was, who's really watching these press conferences? I know in my demographic, I'm under 40, no one was watching the news. And so that's why we had to quickly pivot to get our messages on social media. I believe at one point we were even calling residents to make sure that they were aware. Also, the city of Detroit, we rely on our Department of Neighborhoods, and that's a team of leaders who work in each one of our districts, and they're responsible for sharing information as well. So again, it's important to be nimble, figure out what your audience is or who your audience is, and adjust accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
We're also still trying to figure out what the correct mix is going forward of social media advertising and print advertising, because the world has changed and it's sort of evolving as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, especially this year with everything going on, it's important to reach audiences where they are. Speaking of which, I think Jim is back online, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Jim, and then we'll come back to more audience questions in a little bit.
Thank you, Destiny. I wanted to have each of you talk about content. This kind of is a follow-up to a question or a comment Beth made about having 500 people on a program that they wouldn't have been able to put 100 people in the room on because of logistics. And while the social media platform's important, talk a little bit about the content, the importance of that as well. Kate, I'll start with you.
Sure. So everyone's probably heard the saying content is king, which I truly believe is the truth. However, I think it's important to say what the content is, because you can't simply just put any content out there and expect people to engage with it. You have to create the content that people are looking for. And that is honestly like interesting enough to engage with. So for us, that's been a variety of different things. I don't know if anyone's familiar. We had a program this summer called the Call Sam Chopper Shop. We developed it specifically to engage with our motorcycle riding clients. It was actually a little bit of a rebuild of a motorcycle. So we actually created a mini series where we rebuilt a motorcycle and created an episode every few weeks showing the rebuild. It was hugely successful. And to be honest, like if we had just created a video talking about the importance of, wearing a helmet on your motorcycle and doing that kind of stuff, we would have been creating content, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been content that people would have engaged with at such a large level.
Denise, as I said earlier, I don't know that the how to wear a mask video will ever be replicated, and I don't know that you were intending to go viral, but talk about how do you make content interesting in the social media platforms?
So I am not the content expert, but I feel like I have this conversation with my team almost every day. It's important that when you're creating content, as I can't remember her name, but as Kate just mentioned, it's important to create information that can be easily shared. So you can engage with your audience, but you want that particular graphic, for example, in the health department, I want a graphic to be shared to multiple people. So we are looking at engagement. It's important not to share like a lot of text, but again, share images. And it's always important to share the truth. And we're sharing information based upon what we know. And we're always changing the content as well so that it can be easily absorbed and also easily shared.
Beth, you started us down this line because your content drove a bigger turnout than you thought. But do you have anything else you want to share about the importance of content and what you're doing?
Yes, so at the Holocaust Center, so our content can basically be divided into two categories. One category is educational, like trying to teach people about the Holocaust, and the other content is about teaching people about the museum, like trying to get people to come to the museum and trying to get them to watch our programs. So in addition to the marketing that we do to tell people about the programs and about come to the museum, and we have a new exhibit, we also do social media campaigns to just talk about the Holocaust, to try to engage with young audiences. Like we had one campaign that was called "What is 6 million?" and that reached 90,000 people. And then during the pandemic quarantine, when we were all stuck in our houses, we had another campaign called Lessons from a Survivor, where we would have like a picture of a survivor, and the survivor would have a message, and the message wouldn't be like about the Holocaust. It would be like a comforting message, like I got through the Holocaust and this too will pass. And like just comforting messages from survivors to help people engage with our educational content, not just to drive them to visit the museum.
No, very, very important. More of that public image and service aspect that Kate mentioned that the Sam Bernstein Law Firm is doing or did through the pandemic. The Holocaust Memorial Center is doing much the same in that regards. And I promised Bud and Destiny I'd work in the names of your organizations as often as I could, so people would go check on them later. So hopefully I'm doing that to your satisfaction. Denise, realizing you're not the social media guru for the department, a bit about how anybody who does have a better understanding of digital marketing and content creation and filming has evolved over the last 2 years for you.
So it's interesting because the health department has grown significantly. We used to have only one person who was managing all the content and the media and the social media and the digital, but we need more people, especially during the middle of a pandemic. And so we were able to add quite a few bodies to assist us. And these weren't just, people that, they had an interest, but they were actually passionate. And also, the health department, we have created an environment where no idea is a bad idea. We appreciate innovation. We appreciate staff being willing to test out new ideas. So that's really important in the health department. Barb Roethler is the director for marketing and communication, and her team really is leading the way. And it's been a wonderful partnership. As we expand, as we look ahead to 2023, we will have to adjust, and we will have to make sure that our team is equipped with the tools and resources that they need. Because right now we really are still bare bones. And so as we're building out our budget, we're looking at what other platforms will be needed to ensure that we're able to communicate what we need to communicate to the residents.
Well, Beth has mentioned that they're looking for somebody to come on board, and you've sort of indicated you're looking on multiple somebodies to come on board. I guess this is a question to both Denise and Beth. Do you see this as this is not a flash in the pan? This isn't using these tools isn't over in 2023 when everybody's vaccinated. Am I correct in how you're viewing it, Beth?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Denise?
Yes, absolutely too. I remember, 10 years ago, the social media coordinators was like the new hot job. And now there are programs specifically for students who are interested in social media management and digital marketing and communications. And that was just about 10 years ago. So my goodness, I can't wait to see where we evolve over the next 5 to 10 years, but it definitely is needed. Every major organization, I would imagine, in the country, especially in public health, has a communications team, because the role of the health department, one of the major roles is to communicate different health messages. And so social media is going to be very, very powerful.
Well, this is where the Eastern Michigan University Center for Digital Engagement ad should pop up. This is Bud Gibson's passion, is to get folks educated and trained up and successfully employed in this area because it does so much good. But Kate, let me turn to you and ask a question about tools that maybe you've discovered or begun using or stopped using during the pandemic as you tried to shift and find your audience in different places. Are there tools you'd recommend to folks, or say, hey, that didn't work for me?
Yeah, sure. So to be honest, a lot of the tools for tracking we had already been using in-house prior to the pandemic, but there are a ton of resources out there. If people out there aren't using Google Analytics for your business, you're missing out. So there's a ton of tools, and adding UTM tracking codes to campaigns that can be enormously effective to attribute where leads are coming from. So we were using that prior to the pandemic, but I'd say like it's only been amplified since then as far as our reliance on it. So yeah, there hasn't really been anything that we've used that's been new, but we've always kind of used SEMrush for our SEO tracking, Google Analytics, a bunch of just different tracking codes to track the effectiveness of where leads are coming. And they're still just as important as they were pre-pandemic, and honestly, more important, if anything.
And Denise, let me ask, as you get reports from your team, are they delivering to you key performance indicators, KPIs, or using other tools to report to you that, yeah, we are actually finding our audience, we are finding those folks, we're getting the message out to the unvaccinated? Talk to us a little bit about the importance of tools and results, right?
Yeah, so it's, well, first let me say I am a self-proclaimed data geek. So I love numbers. I have to understand, where we are in terms of baseline, because, if you don't know where you're going, it really doesn't make sense. And so my team puts together every month a report that I know, so I can see the engagement, I can see the number of likes, I can see the number of shares, and they have all of the jargon, but it all boils down to, are we communicating with people? And over the last year, the number of hits has been through the roof. We know the number of people who are coming to the Facebook page. And we didn't really know, if you asked me this question 2 years ago, that wasn't really a huge interest of ours. We didn't really, it was great to have Facebook, but we weren't really looking at the metrics every day to figure out who was actually coming. But now I know, even by demographic, by district, the number of people who are coming to our Facebook page. So that is really important. So yes, metrics are everything. And again, that really helps to drive decisions as well.
And Beth, we wanted you on this eclectic panel because you're representing sort of the small entity, the nonprofit entity. How do you track or know what, maybe there's tools you use or key performance indicators you're watching that you're finding your audience?
So we use many of the ones that Kate mentioned, but as I mentioned before, so my time is split between marketing and fundraising, and that doesn't just include social media marketing. So we do use consultants. We have one consultant who's just a Google consultant, and he's like a Google SEO expert. And we send him ads, and he places them, and he keeps track of everything, and he sends us reports. And then we also have another consultant that we use, like a general social media consultant, and I'm relying on her very heavily now since the social media manager left, and we're sort of in between right now. But we create a monthly report, and we look at all the different social media streams, and we try to figure out what we're doing now that we're coming to the end of the year. So as I mentioned before, I want to take a look and see how our spending has been in different areas, and try to figure out if we have the right mix, if we should be spending more on Facebook, or if we should be, getting rid of some of our print advertising, or if we should have more print advertising. Some of our print advertising is really to our donors, because since we're a nonprofit, we have donors. So there's one publication that we know that our donors read. So even though we don't necessarily get a lot of people who see our ads and then come to our programs or come to the museums from this print publication, it's worth it for us to keep advertising there, because it helps our donors understand our value, and then it increases our donations. But there's really like very little way for us to measure that directly. Like we also often wonder what the correlation is. Like, let's say if we have like a fundraising event, like our annual dinner, which happens to be the Sunday, if we place an ad for that, and then the next day we get a lot of people calling up to buy tickets, so we see a correlation there. But usually our program participants do not necessarily say that they're reading it in the print publication, but we're not ready to get rid of print yet. That's what I'm saying.
I understood. Well, let me turn it over to my co-host, Destiny Frank, to see if we've picked up any more Facebook questions that should be answered. Destiny?
Yes, we have a few more. We're going to start off with a question from Anna, and it says, Beth, do you have any words of inspiration to help businesses that are struggling to transition to online?
You just have to do it. I'm in my 50s, so I'm not like a young tech whiz kid. You know what I'm saying? And I'm still doing all this stuff. There is a lot of technological knowledge that you can gain, but you can gain it. You can definitely do it. Anyone can do it. You just need to, put in the time, and then you'll be able to do it. So you shouldn't be discouraged.
Let me jump in on that, Destiny, as Legal Help for Veterans, which is a veterans disability law firm that our whole approach is online digital for 2 decades now. In the beginning, I did it. I was kind of like Beth. I was trying to do it myself, and then I got a consultant for a while. Then I changed consultants again, and another one. You go through that a while, and then you finally realize that the value proposition is such. You hire somebody to do it on staff, like HMC is doing now, and Kate's role. So I guess my advice to business owners who are sort of struggling with the transition is just what Beth is saying. You got to start with one step, move yourself along, and someday you'll want somebody as professional at it as Kate is. But in the beginning, you
Legal. However, there's a lot of things that I've kind of stepped in and started doing a little more. PR is, I would say. So a lot of the projects we've been doing so much more. Spread the word of the good that we're doing in the community outside of just kind of trying to bring leads in-house through my usual marketing efforts.
Mm-hmm. Denise?
Yeah, so absolutely. It is nonstop crisis mode every day, 24/7 for the last 20 months. And if you ask any public health professional if they were prepared for this moment, depends. Some people will say yes, and some will say no. I think we're always prepared for an emergency, but this experiencing a worldwide pandemic has been nothing short of a miracle. At the health department, we all work. So in the health department, we were working with medical schools, we were working with hospitals, we were working with nursing homes, churches, businesses, organizations. Nonstop every day for the last 20 months. And for me personally, I'm not a fan, never have been, never will be a fan. But once again, I was thrown into the spotlight as the health officer with no media training. So I had to get media training real quick. And, the goal was to communicate to residents about the importance of COVID. And again, we were sharing information based upon what we knew at the time. So absolutely, the role has changed, and it's going to forever change how we interact with the city, and how we interact with residents. The health department has, again, been thrown into the spotlight in such a way that now residents know first, there is a health department, and second, that they can come to us for pretty much everything relating to their health needs. And so it has been a very crazy time over the last 20 months. But again, we're prepared. So.
What about you, Beth? What is your experience of maybe switching roles or going outside of your comfort zone?
So, well, this month especially, since we don't have a social media manager, Hootsuite has become my best friend. And I've been doing a lot on WordPress also, and a woman who works with me is a grant writer, so she's been sort of pressured into taking over the constant contact email blasts, which has been a lot of work for her because we have our big fundraising dinner on Sunday, so we've been sending out lots and lots of e-blasts about it. So, but it's good. Now I have new skills to put on makes my job more interesting to do different things. I like it.
So we have another tech question of whoever wants it first from G. It says, can you talk about your thoughts on paid versus owned content? Do you find your focus has shifted since the pandemic?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kate. Take that one.
Okay. I'd say that's a really good question. I wouldn't say that we've moved away from paid advertising, but I think we've realized the importance of having our own content a lot more since the pandemic, especially as people just spend more time online using streaming and different services like that. So we've started creating a lot more owned content than we were prior, but we're not by any means abandoning the paid stuff that we're doing either.
Does anyone else have anything to add about paid or content? Thank you, Kate. I know we're running close on time, but I think we have another question. We have a question for Denise from Anna. It says, Denise, I read somewhere that you are an introvert by nature. How did it feel to be in the spotlight daily, speaking on every platform to educate people about safety and wellness practices throughout the pandemic?
You found me out. You're right. I am an introvert. And I remember, I think I was being quoted for that article. I do not, as I said, I don't like public speaking. I don't think anybody really enjoys that. And fun fact, if you watch the first press conference from, I think it was March 2020, I think it was March 11th or March 12th, you can see the look of terror on my face. My knees are knocking, like I'm sweaty, and all these cameras are looking at both the mayor and I. I've come a long way. What I have learned, and I said this before when I logged in a little bit late, in the middle of a crisis, you have to put your nerves aside. And the fact that I was nervous on every press conference, on every station, I had to, again, put my nerves aside to communicate a message to Detroiters, because if that message was not communicated, then more people would be impacted. More people would not get information and they could die. And so that thought was in the back of my mind. And so it has been, again, a little bit of a challenge. And I speak really fast and my mind is going, and I'm actually on my phone right now because we're still in crisis mode. But the bottom line is you've got to get the work done. So Anna, great question. And if you're like me, and if you're an introvert, at the end of the day, somebody's got to do it. And I was a sacrificial lamb. So there you go.
We're doing God's work. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys, and thank you guys for the great audience questions. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to pass it over to Jim. Has a couple more questions.
Thanks, Destiny. I actually want to build a little bit on Denise's comment about being nervous, because it also ties to the comment about creating your own content or buying somebody else's content, right? So I guess I'd like a reaction from Beth and Kate about convincing people to be involved in the content you're creating, even though they're nervous, because it's going to be for the audience a better content that's delivered to them. And I know, Kate, I believe you use other lawyers in your advertising. My friend Mark Bernstein is a pro at it. He probably has a SAG card. He does so much TV work. But talk about getting others involved in the importance of that in creating content.
Yeah. So to Denise's point, nobody really wants to be in the spotlight. Even the Bernsteins don't truly want to be in the spotlight, but it's kind of the world that they were born into, to be honest, just because we're a family firm. They've become pros at it, but a lot of the attorneys and a lot of people that we interview for various pieces of content that we're creating in-house are very, very, very nervous. And we do our best to try to make it as, I don't know, fun and as natural as possible. But yeah, people's nerves definitely get stirred up when doing public speaking and being the face of a campaign. I think the big thing to focus on is, like Denise said, the end goal. Like in her case, she was trying to educate people and at the end of the day, save lives. In our case, it's not quite as dire, but at the end of the day, we're trying to help people when they're injured. And getting people to kind of realize the end goal, I think, is definitely helpful from that standpoint. And also just to make it fun and lighthearted so they're less nervous about it is kind of what I found to be very effective.
Let me switch to what will probably end up being the final question. I'd like everybody to comment on this. And Beth, I'll start with you. Can you comment a little bit about how everybody reports to somebody, right? So whether it's your board or your boss or your mayor, we all report to somebody. So talk a little bit about how this push into digital marketing for your organization has been received up the chain. We've been talking about finding your audience out in the public, but give me some reaction as you look up the chain, how it's been received over the last 2 years.
It's been received extremely well. I think that it's the people who I report to and also our board are extremely supportive of our social media pivot and social media advertising. That's just the world we live in today, and it's necessary, and everyone really supports it, and it's a great thing. And also, with social media, you have a lot more hard numbers and data, so it's a lot easier, frankly speaking, to make yourself look good through reports.
Kate, give me a reaction, and Denise, I'll ask you for a quick one as well, because we all know who your boss is.
Yes. So when I started at the firm 5 years ago, one of the big things that I mentioned when I came in is that there was a little bit of a gap between what we were doing traditionally and digitally, despite the fact that so many people were consuming content digitally. So to be honest, I mean, we're a brand that was built on traditional TV advertising and print. So there was some hesitation. I wouldn't say that there was a reluctance to do it, but there was definitely, some concern making an enormous shift in our marketing efforts like that. But it's been well received. And over the last 2 years since the pandemic, well, I guess a year and a half, 2 years now, since the pandemic started, I think it's been recognized the need to switch even more, just as people have continued to shift the way they're consuming media. And I think, to be honest, like a lot of people who weren't consuming as much media prior to the pandemic digitally are now doing that, which I think has only amplified the need and made the need more recognized.
And Denise, quickly give us a reaction how your boss, Mayor Mike Duggan, who just got reelected big time, has reacted to this shift.
So let me just say 3 things about Mayor Mike Duggan, and everyone knows this. Mayor Mike Duggan is involved. He's always involved. He's not sitting in some sort of ivory tower. He is in the trenches with the health department, with his team. That was very, very important. Not only is he in the room, but he is supportive and listening to our all of our ideas. So he's very much involved. He's also detail oriented and expects results. And that is what we gave him. And so the digital platform was well received. In fact, he was really involved in looking at data as well. What was really helpful, and I did not talk about this, was billboards throughout the 140 square miles of the city of Detroit. when information was changing rapidly, we relied on digital billboards to communicate the message, and that was really what the mayor wanted us to do, and we got it done. But yes, very supportive, and it was well received.
Well, we're at the end of our hour, and it's important to stay on track. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is our third panel for the digital marketing workshop. I want to thank Destiny Frank, my co-host, who's done a great job, and Bud Gibson, who's the organizer and force behind all of this every year. It wouldn't happen without him. So thanks to both of you folks and EMU and the Center for Digital Engagement. But a real big thanks to our eclectic panel here, Beth Snider, Kate Sandretto, Denise Fair Razo. We wanted to bring you together because you all had different experiences, different sort of organizations. So I think you've given a lot of good content, as we've been talking about, homemade content to the audience. So thank you. And I want to remind our listeners, I'm used to doing Veterans Radio, our listeners. I want to remind our folks watching on Facebook Live that tomorrow you can join tomorrow's panel, Digital for Autos, right here again on Facebook Live at the Center for Digital Engagement. And Bud, I think I turn it back to you.
Well, Jim, thank you very much. And panel, thank you all very much. And I'm going to go out with this shot of you and the panel, Jim. So I'm going to switch right back over and let everybody wave goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great.
Bye now.